Yeah, so as Chris said, this is my final talk for Shuso, and I just want to thank everyone for your attention and deep listening, being so patient and attentive and encouraging, all your encouraging words. Thank you. Thank you so much. And for this one, I want to kind of bring back what I've spoken about many times of my personal koan of, how do I save the world? And is it enough? Am I doing enough? So, when we see the amount of suffering in this world, and now with COVID and with climate change, it becomes overwhelming to me at times. And so there's a couple of koans that really speak a bit about this, and I'm not want to really go deeply into them, but because there's just so many layers to koans, but just to kind of touch on one. This is from says it in relation really to in my climate change. I've been listening, been in part of the climate, what is it? Citizens Climate Lobby. And they have some, recently I did a Zoom call and they were talking about the organization that's going on, the progress that's really been made in the world, despite all, all the bad news we hear, that, in terms of like indigenous groups rising up to organize and people in general getting more involved. A couple of years ago, they were saying there was only maybe half a dozen groups worldwide organizing, indigenous groups organizing for climate change, and now there are hundreds. And there's Casey Camp Hornick, who is a Ponca elder and leader here in the United States. She and a group of people have started or championed really the idea of rights of nature, and that that the natural world is not here for us to exploit, but rather to realize our kinship with and have gratitude for, and that rivers and mountains are persons, have personhood. And just as in our laws, we've given personhood to corporations, which has many legal ramifications, but we've given we should give personhood to the natural world. So this koan is in Dogen's collection of koans, Title Laureates, number 16, Chang Sha returning to mountains, rivers, and the great earth. And the case is, Zen master Chang Sha was once asked by a monastic, how do you turn the mountains, rivers, and great earth and return to the self? Chang Sha said, how do you turn the self and return to the mountains, rivers, and great earth? The capping verse is, there's no place to hide the true self. When the universe disintegrates, it remains indestructible. This gigantic body ultimately has no abode. So to me, it just expands it. It just expands it, that, and when we think about, the destruction of climate change and all these things, just to have this bigger view, there is no place to hide the true self. The universe disintegrates. When the universe disintegrates, it remains indestructible. This gigantic body ultimately has no abode. And, you know, I'm always trying to, you know, save everything and save my socks and save the world and don't let anything, you know, keep it all and protect everything. And at one of our breakout sessions, Susan Spencer gave a wonderful turning word. And she said, the teacup is already broken. You know, it's just, it is what it is. You know, we've already died. It's already done in one way, you know, we carry on. But it just, there's like an expectation. I remember having a glass coffee pot that I, every time I washed it, I thought it was really slippery. And I was like, one day, this is going to slip and it's going to break. This glass coffee pot, I know it is going to break. So like, I don't know, 7, 8 years later, when it did slip and break, I was like, see, told you so. Told you that was going to break. So it is just, it just gives another perspective. And the other thing that really came up for me in contemplating this was is the practice of Tonglen, of giving and taking. And I think in one of our breakout groups, I think what Christine, we were talking about what a sweet practice that is, and how it's so helpful. I mean, so many of it's not climate change. It's also we're taking care of our, we're aging, we're taking care of our spouses, we're taking care of our children and our families and our elder parents and our pets, and you know, there's a lot on our plates. And so taking and sending Tonglen, I'm going to read from Pema Chodron, comfortable with uncertainty, and just talks about it, and then we can do it a little bit. So Tonglen, which translates in English into taking and sending, and I'm sure everyone's pretty well aware of this practice, says, number 1, rest your mind for a second or two in a state of openness or stillness. This is called flashing absolute bodhicitta, or the sudden opening of basic spaciousness, clarity of the awakened heart. So just sitting for a moment and being with our spacious, open sense of this great body has no abode anywhere. Then working with texture, begin breathing in the feeling of hot, dark, and heavy, a sense of claustrophobia. Breathing out a feeling of cool, bright, and light, a sense of freshness. Breathe in through all the pores of your body and radiate out completely through all the pores of your body. Do this until your visualization feels synchronized with your in and out breaths. Then next is contemplate a painful situation that's real to you. You can breathe in the hot, dark, constricted feeling of sadness that we feel, and breathe out a light, cool sense of joy or space or whatever might provide relief. Then widening the circle of compassion, connecting with all those who feel this kind of pain, extending that wish to everyone. So I'll just try to, we'll go along with this a little bit, maybe give it a few minutes. And we can, as a metta meditation, we start with ourselves. And the instruction is, you know, when we feel our own, whatever we feel, if even in the moment we can realize everyone else in the world who feels this way. And then we're taking in not only our own pain and sadness, our own distress, depression, whatever, but anyone else in the whole world who's ever felt like this. And then send out the cool, refreshing, the balm, the healing that we could think of for this. Feeling good, feeling light, feeling joy. And we wish that for everyone. And this is not, we don't have to be afraid of it, because we're not personally taking on some negative energy or some solid event. It's more like composting. It's more like transmuting. It's more like accepting that everyone feels this way, and we're part of those that feel this way, and accepting and sending out our love and compassion to them. So let's do this for a little while. Starting with the flash of spaciousness and openness, and then our own discomforts, and gradually sending it out in ever widening circles, family, friends, enemies. In terms of freedom, I draw in the pain of being in prison or stuck at borders or stuck in any situation, and send out the feeling of lightness, openness, freedom. Freedom within our circumstance, freedom from our circumstance. And in coming back and closing that with just flashing our absolute bodhicitta, flashing our spaciousness for ourselves and everyone in the being. Another koan that comes up for me is one that is, the world is vast and wide. Why do we put on our robe at the sound of the bell? Why do we do what we do? What do we do that we think we should be doing? When I get up in the morning, whatever our work is, whether we're getting up and doing zazen, or we're getting up and taking care of children, or taking care of elders, or our pets, or our family, or going to work, whatever our work is, we just get up and do it. We just get up and do it because that's what we said we'd do. That's what our life is. AIDS activist, young African man years ago said, do what you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. I take great comfort from that. I really do. And in terms of the all of these things, all of these koans have just so many layers and levels, and it's just sort of just scratching the surface of them all. So in one of my responses to global warming and climate change and the rest of our earthly doings is I wrote a story called Freda the Great, and it's a children's story. And I thought I wanted to read it to you. And just for, so it's for me, it's about having, I mean, it's been percolating for quite a while. And I read it to a friend who said that the sort of the pith symbolism comes from an old Norse story from the tales of Odin. And, you know, my ancestry is Northern European and Scandinavian, so it seems kind of right. And it's about, you know, that we don't really always appreciate all that we are doing, that just getting up in the morning, just being alive is enough. So here we go. Oh, and I also want to say that my granddaughter's actually here with me today. It's usually when I've given a talk, I've found somewhere else for her to be. So, you know, if the dogs bark and the kids yell and all the rest of it, it's how it is. So this is called, we get to be kids now and hear a silly children's story. Freda the Great. Once in the time before times, or after times, in the place between the worlds, a place very like here and now, there lived a girl named Freda. Now, Freda lived by the ocean. She loved the ocean, the waves, the tide pools, and the rocky shores. She learned to swim as a young girl, and as she grew, she learned to surf, becoming a brilliant and daring surfer. She could ride even the biggest waves with ease and joy. She knew the ocean and loved it well. But over time, she began to notice that the tides were coming in further and further onto the beach and flooding the land. Going inland to her village, she saw that while the sea was rising, the rivers were drying and the rains were coming too much or too little. Freda went to her family and asked them what was happening to the water, to the ocean, to the seasons. Her family did not know. They said that everyone was talking about it and wondering what to do and why. Everyone had a different idea and no one could agree. So they began to fight with each other, only arguing and fighting, not sharing, not cooperating. Nothing was being done. When Freda heard this, she became very sad. It seemed to her that the people were out of balance, that the earth was out of balance. Getting no answers from her people, she walked and wandered down to the ocean, as the ocean had always been her refuge. She sat by the shore for a long time and talked to the ocean. Freda asked the ocean what she could do to help bring the earth and the people back into balance. After some time, not hearing any clear answers, she decided she must look further, got up, got on her surfboard and dove into the waves. Feeling her feelings, so many of confusion, sadness, wonder, fear, determination, she rode the waves. The ocean held all her feelings and her questions as she surfed along, gradually becoming more peaceful. All at once, a great wave swept up, rose up and swept her far, far down the shore, and she was swept up the beach and into a cavern along a rocky coast. Picking herself up out of the sand and wondering where she was, for it was certainly nowhere she had ever been before, she noticed that this cavern went back into the hills quite a ways, and there was a dim light coming from way back in the caves. Oh, someone's calling Grandma. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. So Freda followed that light deeper into the caves. She went on and on, walking in sea wet water and wet sand with a dim light just ahead. Around the next bend, she saw, or thought she saw, that the light was growing stronger and coming from an odd hut that seemed to be growing out of the rock wall. As she got closer, she saw it was a small room with a fireplace. By the fireplace was an old woman rocking, and a black cat was sitting by the hearth. Now, Freda was amazed and a bit scared, but she was also curious, and she remembered her family, the people she wanted to help, and she knew she must go in and ask for help. She really didn't know where she was or if she was dreaming, but she took a breath, found her courage, and knocked on the door of the hut. The old woman quit rocking, looked up with a frown and said, "Go away." Freda was scared. She saw that the old woman's eyes were piercing, dark, deeper than night, and that she was ancient, faintly glowing like a parchment lantern, as if she was mostly made of light. Freda, all she could do was stammer, well, who are you? The old woman looked at her a long time and then said, "Well, you're braver than I thought. I will tell you. I am Baba Yaga, a wise one. I am older than time. You have come a long way. What do you want?" Freda for a moment couldn't even speak, but then she remembered her family and said, "I asked the ocean for help and the ocean brought me to you. Now I'm asking you, please help us. The tides are rising. The people are fighting. They have forgotten how to share. The earth is out of balance. Please tell me what to do." Baba Yaga scoffed and said, You're just a small girl. What can you do? At least come and be of some help and bring me my cat from the fire, my cat Coco. She's there on the hearth. Freda looked and she saw this cat and it appeared that it was growing bigger and bigger. It looked enormous, with a gigantic tail that swirled down into the floor. Lifting this cat seemed to be impossible, but Freda summoned her courage and walked over saying, "Oh, good kitty, it's good, okay." Tried to pick Coco up. The cat was so huge and heavy that Freda could not move it at all. She was frightened because this cat was very strange. It was getting larger by the moment. Its eyes kept changing from yellow to green and back again as it hissed at her. Then she noticed that the cat's tail was stuck down in the floorboards. Freda was frightened, but she was also brave and very kind and felt sorry for the cat. With its tail stuck, she thought maybe she could free Coco, and tugged and pulled and pulled and tugged, and slowly the cat's tail began to move, and then suddenly it was free. But as the cat's tail became free, the hut shook and rumbled, and seawater began to pour out of the hole in the floor where the cat's tail had been. Seawater at first, and then trash. Old plastic, rusty things, garbage people had thrown into the ocean. Baba Yaga jumped up, grabbed her broom, and began sweeping the salt water and sweeping everything. And she swept Freda right out of the hut, saying, "That's quite enough. Out with you, foolish girl, be gone." Well, Freda was washed out of the hut and onto the sand and found herself being pulled out of the cavern by a great wave, sucking her back out into the ocean. She was pulled and tossed every which way, finally washing up on the shore in a huge pile of garbage. Wet, dirty, sandy, exhausted, she gasped and looked around. It looked like her home village, but everywhere there were heaps and heaps and piles of garbage mixed with seaweed that looks like it come from the bottom of the sea. She sank to the ground crying, "What have I done? What has happened? I didn't get any answers. I've failed and made things worse." Falling down in the sand, she cried and cried until she wept and finally slept. Sometime later, Freda was awakened by someone tapping on her shoulder and calling to her softly. She jumped up to see her family and the people of the village all around her. They had buckets and hoes and shovels and pitchforks, and they were working together to clean up the ocean and the land. They told her that a huge tsunami wave had come and left this garbage everywhere on the beach and in the village. It kept coming and coming and coming until it was impossible to go on with their lives as they had been. The people realized that this trash was garbage they had thrown into the ocean and finally understood what they had done and that they must clean it up. No one could do it alone. The task was so enormous. The people had to stop fighting, come together, work together, cooperate, and share. As they worked together, it became easier and people felt happier. Freda was delighted. She was hugging her family. They were telling their stories. They were having a wonderful time. Then they looked out in the ocean, and there just offshore in the waves, they saw Baba Yaga, the old woman. Blinking and rubbing their eyes in wonderment, they saw that she was riding on the back of a great serpent, an ancient water dragon. The dragon's head was gold with silver whiskers. It had green and yellow eyes. The great body of blue-green scales with beautiful wings, flashing purple and blue, indigo and violet in the sun. Baba Yaga called out to Freda, "Thank you, Freda. Congratulations, young one. You doubted yourself and thought that you had failed because you couldn't pick up my little cat. I name you Freda the Great. You thought you had failed, but truly you are more powerful than you know. You thought she was a cat, but actually you were freeing this great water dragon that you see before you now, Koi Koi Vilu, the ancient dragon who rules the oceans. She is a shapeshifter, a wise one, the dragon who balances the waters of the earth. Her tail had become trapped under the garbage people have thoughtlessly, carelessly thrown into the rivers and washed into the sea. In lifting her tail just a little, you freed her and brought balance back to the waters of the earth. People now understand that they must work together in caring for each other, in caring for the earth, the rivers and oceans. That all is interconnected in the web of life. Thank you, Freda. With that, Baba Yaga and the great dragon Kokovilu flew up into the sky, flying with the clouds and showering down a clear, gentle rain on the people who clapped and cheered and promised to always care for the earth. And so it was in that time between the worlds when a small girl surfed the waves, found magic, and brought balance. Then the rivers flowed again to the sea and the rains came in due season. People listened and cared for the earth as their mother. And sometimes, even now, we can look up in the sky and see Baba Yaga and Kokoivilu riding the sky as cloud beings. And sometimes we can see what appears to be a small girl on a surfboard riding next to them. So that's my story. Why do I get up in the morning and put on my robe at the sound of the bell? So thank you everyone for listening. And